was catching on fire.
The fires forcing mass evacuations, sending residents and tourists into nearby Red Cross shelters. Popular area attractions were under threat, including Ripley's Aquarium of the Smokies, which houses 1,500 animals and marine life, and the Dollywood theme park. At least 150 homes and businesses damaged or destroyed, including this 16-story hotel complex in Gatlinburg. A guest shot this video before escaping.
But all of the previous fires I've been part of could not have prepared me for what we have experienced over the past 24 hours.
Listen how this fire started.
Well, Anderson, a short time ago, I talked to a National Park Service official, and she told me that this set of fires was human-caused. I pressed her several times on whether that means this was arson. She would not go there. She said it is human-caused, and it is under investigation. But a few minutes later, she did tell me we'd love to catch this person. So while they're not maybe ready to draw the line directly yet to arson, they seem to be getting pretty close to that.
All right, Brian Todd, Brian, thanks. In a moment at the top of the hour, new CNN special report, War in Space, the next battlefield. Here's the nightmare scenario. U.S. satellites in space targeted and destroyed. Everything from bank transactions to stock markets to traffic lights, GPS navigation for airline pilots could freeze. Smart bombs could become dumb. TVs, the internet, cell phones could stop working. The U.S. military is spending billions to protect against a potential attack. Here's a quick preview of the special report from CNN's Jim Sciutto.
Weapons fired from Earth is one thing, but now the U.S. is considering capabilities it could deploy on the front lines in space, arming satellites.
You could have weapons that could be fired against the weapons that are coming at you.
Secretary Work raised the possibility of arming satellites with weapons he compared to the depth charges that Navy surface ships used to defend against enemy submarines during World War II.
And so you can imagine us doing that type of activity in space. Essentially, it would all be defensive in nature, trying to keep our satellites from being destroyed. So some people might say, well, that sounds like offensive war in space to me. We look at this as totally defensive.
A whole new kind of warfare. That does it for us, the CNN special. Good evening. Thanks for joining us in an exclusive interview tonight. Senator Elizabeth Warren on whether she thinks she can work with President-elect Donald Trump and why she says her side lost the election. That's coming up in a moment. But first, we begin with how the Trump administration is coming together. Still no word on who will be the Secretary of State, although the list apparently is down to 4. But other appointments are coming in. CNN senior White House correspondent Jim Acosta joins me now with the latest. Jim, the last time we spoke with you, you were in a New York City restaurant whispering to me on the phone.
That's right.
While watching the meeting between Mitt Romney and Trump. Looks like you paid your bill. You were able to leave. What's the latest on last night's meeting?
We did pay our bill, Anderson, just for the record there. But it looked like as they were picking up their forks, they buried the hatchet at this dinner last night. As you were hearing us describe it last night, it was a very warm and friendly exchange. And the question now is whether or not this was enough to get Mitt Romney the job of Secretary of State. I talked to a transition source earlier today who described this meeting as a net positive. That's if you calculate how things went last night and subtract all of the negative comments that Mitt Romney has had to say about Donald Trump over the past year. But Anderson, I think the other thing that's important to note is that some of Mitt Romney's detractors like Newt Gingrich and Mike Huckabee were sort of enjoying themselves today in various interviews talking about Romney eating crow and groveling at Donald Trump's feet. And so perhaps those critics of Mitt Romney have been satisfied in terms of what they saw last night. But at this point, no final decision has been made.
Beyond Secretary of State, there were a number of appointments made today.
That's right. Steve Mnuchin, who was the finance chair for Donald Trump's campaign, he was tapped as the Treasury Secretary. He's a multimillionaire. Wilbur Ross is a billionaire who was tapped for Secretary of Commerce, and a Deputy Secretary of Commerce was also named. Todd Ricketts from the wealthy Ricketts family in Chicago that owns the Chicago Cubs. It's giving some Americans, I'm sure, out there a sense that Donald Trump is putting together not a team of rivals, but a team of the super rich. And we should also point out one other name that was floated out there today, Sarah Palin, the former Alaska governor, has been talked about as the next potentially Secretary of Veterans Affairs. But I've been told by sources that may be coming more from Sarah Palin's camp than from the transition team.
Donald Trump tweeted today that he is leaving his business in order to avoid conflicts of interest, or I should say business operations. But did he give any real details beyond that?
No, only that he's pulling out of his business, he said, in total in those tweets today. But no talk of whether he's going to put this in a blind trust. He says he's going to be talking about this in a news conference on December 15th with his children. And Anderson, what has not been resolved is just how all of this will be handled and whether or not his children will have a role in his presidency. Of course, that will also create conflicts of interest if they are in charge of his businesses. But then at the same time, meeting with foreign leaders and so forth, as we've seen so far during this transition process. And keep in mind, Anderson, the Constitution still says that Donald Trump, as President of the United States, cannot accept gifts from foreign governments. That is technically something he can be impeached for. And so these are all details we'll be waiting to hear from the president-elect when he holds that news conference.
All right, Jim Acosta, Jim, thanks. President-elect Trump's choice for Treasury Secretary is drawing a new round of fire from Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren, who's been obviously very vocal about several of Trump's appointments. I spoke with Senator Warren exclusively shortly before. Senator Warren, earlier today you said that the pick of Steve Mnuchin, quote, should send shivers down the spine of every American who got hit hard by the financial crisis. Is that fair? I mean, should no one who worked in finance during that time be eligible?
No, that's not really the point. I mean, look at it this way. What happened is that the Wall Street bankers crashed the economy, they got bailed out, and nobody went to jail. And that made the American people really, really furious. They're still angry about it. Donald Trump tapped into that anger, and he promised when he was running for president that he would break the connection between Wall Street and this Congress. He said he was going to separate that from the government, no more revolving door. He wasn't going to do that sort of thing. And then what does he do? He turns around and picks a guy who had actually been one of the people who helped do all of those lousy mortgages that not only broke the economy but broke millions of families. And then after the crash, a guy who turned around and bought a bank that then became infamous for how hard it squeezed families that had already been cheated, and was the foreclosure machine following that. You know, the American people, this is a guy who also said that today that he wants to roll back the Wall Street regulations. The American people are furious over what Wall Street has done. They don't want somebody who's going to come in here and say, hey, let's help Wall Street. And what Donald Trump is doing is he's literally handing the keys to the Treasury over to a Wall Street banker who helped cause the crash.
Mnuchin, though, speaking about himself and also about Wilbur Ross, who's Trump's pick to run Commerce, said, and I quote, "One of the good things about both Wilbur and I, we've actually been bankers. We were the only two people during the financial crisis that were issued licenses by the government. We've been in the business of regional banking. We understand what it is to make loans." I mean, Donald Trump talked about not wanting Washington insiders. You can argue Mnuchin has never held a government post. I know he's obviously a financial insider. Isn't Donald Trump just doing what he promised?
No, Donald Trump promised that he was not going to have a government that was going to work for Wall Street. He promised that he was not going to have a revolving door. He criticized how close the connection is between Wall Street and this government. And he promised that he was going to stand on the side of the American people. He was not going to stand with Wall Street. And then he turns around and his first big economic appointment is to appoint a Wall Street insider, a guy who made millions of dollars off mortgages that crushed families financially. That's who it is he's putting in charge here.
Do you approve of any of the president-elect's cabinet picks today?
Well, you know, I don't know. Today he just talked about having the U.S. attorney, Preet Bharara, down, and I think Preet is, you know, a pretty terrific guy. So maybe it'll turn out that he'll have one of these appointments. I don't know.
But no one he has selected so far.
Well, so far what we have seen is that Donald Trump has doubled down on racism and bigotry. He's got as his strategic advisor a person who's a white supremacist, and he's now going down.
There's no evidence he's a white supremacist. I mean, he obviously, there's people who are white supremacists who support Donald Trump and who support like Breitbart or Steve Bannon. But
Steve Bannon has certainly associated himself with white supremacists. Will you go that far?
I mean, I don't know that you can say, though, he's a white supremacist.